Investing into homes for Nunavut is what the federal government needs to be doing.
Tonight, Nunavut's MP tours homes in the territory and shows media how dire the situation is.
Now surrounded, encouraged, and protected by hundreds of other officers who feel the exact same way.
We take another look inside private RCMP member Facebook groups.
Something that we hope people understand when they watch this film, that what happened to us should not have happened to us, and it should not happen again.
And the sister of Colten Boushie on the documentary, We Will Stand Up. Good evening, I'm Brittany Hobson. We begin tonight in Montreal, where the controversial John A. Macdonald statue in the city is no more. It met a violent end during a Defund the Police demonstration held over the weekend. A now viral video captures the moment where demonstrators topple the bronze likeness of Macdonald from its perch at Place de Canada in Montreal's downtown core. According to Montreal police, crowds dispersed shortly after the statue hit the ground. So far, no arrests have been made. Mayor Valerie Plante said the vandalism will not be, quote, accepted or tolerated. Speaking in Montreal Monday, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau also expressed disappointment.
I understand the impatience, the frustration of Canadians who faced systemic discrimination and racism throughout their lives, and their concern that we act quickly on that, and their impatience, because I myself am impatient. We need to move forward quickly and in the right ways on countering systemic discrimination, and our government will do just that. But we are a country of laws, and we are a country that needs to respect those laws, even as we seek to improve and change them. And those kinds of acts of vandalism are not advancing the path towards greater justice and equality in this country.
The pulling down of John A. Macdonald's statue on Saturday caught the attention of Alberta Premier Jason Kenney. The Premier tweeted the statue was brought down by a group of what he called an extreme left mob. He suggested that if Montreal decides not to restore the statue, Alberta would be happy to put it on display at the province's legislature. Treaty 6 Grand Chief Billy Morin says a monument for Treaty 6 would be more appropriate.
The position that I have read thus far has been that John A. Macdonald was an important foundational part of Canadian history. The incident that happened in Quebec over this past weekend is just not a priority, I would say, for First Nations, and it shouldn't be a priority for the government of Alberta.
We want to hear what you think. Here's how to continue the conversation. Send your emails to news@aptn.ca. Find us online at aptnnews.ca and on youtube.com/aptnnews. Also, you can follow APTN News on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for more Indigenous news. Nunavut's MP has been on a tour of the territory this summer, but this was no staycation. She was out to see the reality of Nunavut's housing crisis for herself. Today, she shared some of what she's learned with media in Iqaluit. Here is Kent Dishkal with more on that.
I just finished traveling.
Nunavut's MP, Mumilak Kakak, has been spending the summer visiting Nunavut communities to see Nunavut's housing problems up close. She's been to 100 homes so far.
There are a lot of reports, there's a lot of statistics and a lot of numbers, but that's exactly what it is. It doesn't put the human aspect and real experiences on paper. I've met elderly women who have openly told me that they live with their abuser and are forced to, and have lived with them for years. I have met parents whose children have been taken to the foster care system because their home is deemed unfit and they have nowhere else to go and no other options. I have met parents whose child has just found another sibling hanging from the ceiling, and in that point in time do not know what to do in the moment and trash the house.
Throughout the tour, she's been collecting data and photos that show just how run down Nunavut's housing is. It's also in very short supply. Nunavut's Housing Corporation estimates they would need 3,000 brand new units just to meet current demand. Add in the fact that Nunavut has Canada's youngest and fastest growing population. The picture is grim.
Yeah, we've seen apologies, and that's a step in the right direction, but concrete action, investing into homes for Nunavut is what the federal government needs to be doing. These violent cycles, these violent systems keep Inuit oppressed, and the federal government continues to feed into that.
Nunavut's MP is different from most MPs. She's younger than most of her colleagues, she's an Inuk woman, and she isn't big on wearing suits. She explains, what you see is what you get.
The way that I do things is very different. I sit on sealskin in the House of Commons. I dress like this. Usually you would see members, you know, they're in suits. I like showing off my tattoos. I like, you know, having my nails done. I like looking different, and I embrace that, and I don't let anybody else tell me otherwise.
Another difference? Many politicians start their next campaign right after being elected. Kakak doesn't know if she would run again if there was a snap election called in September.
I've been in conversation with, you know, certain very, very close people, including Jagmeet, and he's supportive of whatever I decide. But honestly, I see the fence, and I'm smack in the middle of it at this point. I'm not leaning either way. I really don't know.
To visit Nunavut right now, most people have to spend 14 days in isolation due to COVID-19. Kakak is exempt from that as MP. But she's done the 14-day quarantine twice now, voluntarily, so she wouldn't be treated any different than the people she represents, even if she's unsure if she wants to keep representing them. Kent Driscoll, APTN National News, Iqaluit.
There's a significant development in Ottawa on the rush to provide Canadians with a vaccine to fight against COVID-19. The federal government has signed 2 near deals with American manufacturers to reserve millions of doses of a future vaccine. The Prime Minister in Montreal today announced the government has signed agreements with Novavax and Johnson & Johnson. The vaccines are still in clinical trials and won't be purchased unless they are deemed safe and effective by Health Canada. Trudeau says that the government will continue to work to make sure Canada gets a COVID-19 vaccine as soon as possible.
Once a vaccine is proven to work, we'll also need to be able to produce and distribute it here at home. On that front, I can also announce that we're investing over $126 million to expand the biomanufacturing facility right here at the National Research Council Royal Mount.
Trudeau says vaccine agreements with Pfizer, Novavax, and Johnson & Johnson will give Canada at least 88 million doses, with options to attain tens of millions more. Manitoba is re-implementing travel restrictions to northern and remote communities in the province. Those restrictions will go into effect Thursday, September 3rd. The move comes as the province has seen a rise in COVID-19 cases in recent weeks. There are currently 469 active cases. There are no COVID-19 cases in First Nation communities in the province, but there is 1 active case in northern Manitoba. Last week, MKO and AMC Grand Chiefs urged the government to restrict northern travel. This is the second travel restriction to northern Manitoba since the pandemic began.
I'm, in frequent consultation with AMC, MKO, and the Grand Chiefs, and we've had a discussion about re-implementing these restrictions, what they could look like, what kind of purpose they could serve. And as we just saw, increasing numbers in many of the southern regions in Manitoba, just decided that we would move forward with that. So I think we've moved with it pretty expeditiously this time, and they'll be in effect by Thursday.
With September upon us, First Nations are preparing to send kids back to school. But what does this look like during a pandemic? Some First Nations are getting creative in the classroom to address physical distancing, from using shower curtains to clear cubes, while some are choosing to delay start dates.
This is unknown territory. And this is, we go where no person has gone before, in a sense. and so we need to be mindful that each community has a different comfort level.
We'll have more on Back to School later this week on APTN National News. Time now for a quick break. Here is Tuesday's weather forecast starting on the East Coast. 22 above in Halifax, 21 in Charlottetown, 20 above in Happy Valley Goose Bay with some sun, 15 in Nain, 23 in Saguenay, 23 in Quebec City with some rain, 26 in London, Sarnia, and Windsor, expect some rain, 20 above in Thunder Bay, 21 degrees in Elliott Lake in northern Manitoba, 15 in rain in God's Lake and the Paw, 20 above in Gimli and Winnipeg with some rain and cloud, 22 in Saskatchewan, a mix of sun and cloud, and 22 in Swift Current, 13 above in La Ronge and Stony Rapids. Welcome back. Earlier this summer in June, the RCMP publicly acknowledged the systemic racism within its force, but we haven't heard much from the federal police since then. Can they eliminate racism, or is it too late? Angel Moore gives us this exclusive look inside private RCMP member Facebook groups.
3 private Facebook groups uncovered by APTN with more than 24,000 members offer a candid look at current and former Mounties talking about Indigenous people. The buffalo are not coming back. We may even exterminate them a second time. Some comments are general, others in response to news stories or current events. On funding Indigenous language education, one post said, "Why? Get them to work for a living like the rest of Canada." And on the Wet'suwet'en Solidarity rail blockades last winter, they're out there procreating faster than smart people. 2 years ago, APTN exposed the same Facebook groups. This is how Commissioner Brenda Lucki responded.
There was a restorative type approach whereby both members reconciled with the local Indigenous population in some format, similar to a restorative justice type approach.
This time, hundreds of comments, some bigoted, others outright racist. Mi'kmaq lawyer and Professor Pam Palmater says these groups are further proof the force needs a complete overhaul.
Yeah, so these posts, these hundreds of posts are incontrovertible evidence of widespread systemic racism on an individual and institutional level, specifically against Indigenous peoples. So not just generalized. And it shows that the RCMP has a very huge problem with racism.
The Facebook groups are still active. When First Nations leaders called for an inquiry into the fatal police shootings of Chantal Moore and Rodney Levi, one post said, "Too many chiefs, not enough Indians." Another said, "I guess they're trying to set the foundation early to get the sympathy side of the public and set it up for a lawsuit." Metapanaghiag First Nation Chief Bill Ward wants justice for Rodney Levi. He reviewed the comments.
They will carry that bias to the workplace, and again, will put our people in danger, and incidents where our people are getting hurt will continue to happen.
APTN reached out to more than a dozen members of the private Facebook groups. No one responded to our interview request. However, one of the moderators resigned from one of the groups, and his post said, "Remove any posts that were even the least bit controversial," and "Threatening to go to the media will end with your immediate removal." Palmater says the fact so many feel safe expressing racist views in these forums while potential whistleblowers are threatened with expulsion shows how normalized racism is within the force.
But you're now surrounded, encouraged, and protected by hundreds of other officers who feel the exact same way. So that's your normal. That's your normal code of conduct, to be racist and treat Indigenous peoples in a racist way.
MMIWG advocate Gladys Raddick attended the 2018 institutional hearings in Regina when Lucki testified. She was not surprised by the Facebook comments.
Remember that we've been subjected to many, many, many incidents in our lives that would form our thoughts on the RCMP and how we were treated by RCMP. Back then, nothing has changed.
APTN has requested numerous interviews with Lucky since this investigation began in March. She spoke with multiple national media outlets in that time, but repeatedly declined our request. Instead, the RCMP sent a written statement in June. An immediate internal review was launched, which may include a code of conduct investigation. But a police force investigating itself doesn't give Palmater much comfort.
I'm sorry, racism is against the law. You don't, well beyond internal policies and training and codes of conduct, which don't have any criminal attachment to it, but are treated like a matter of human resources.
In Part 2 of Racism in the RCMP, former Indigenous Mounties speak about what it was like inside the force, including former Constable Marjorie Hudson.
That Native people were weaker, that were second class. That's how I felt when I was in the RCMP. That's how they treated me, so that's how I felt.
Angel Moore, APTN National News, Jabuktuk, Halifax.
Time for another quick break. Coming up, the Colten Boushie documentary is coming to APTN. Here's the rest of Tuesday's weather forecast, picking back up in northern Alberta. Sunny skies and 19 in Peace River, 19 above in Grand Prairie. More sun and 20 degrees in Edmonton, 19 above in Red Deer. Over to the west coast, a sunny 31 in Penticton, 22 degrees in Victoria. 16 and rain in Prince George, 14 in Dease Lake. In the Yukon, 15 above in Whitehorse, 16 with a mix of sun and cloud in Beaver Creek. Over to the NWT, 13 degrees in Yellowknife and Watay. 10 above in Colville Lake with some rain. 11 in Fort McPherson. In Nunavut, 11 degrees in Baker Lake, Chesterfield, and Whale Cove. 8 degrees in Clyde River, some sun, and 11 in Cape Dorset. On September 13th, APTN will be airing a documentary titled We Will Stand Up, which chronicles the death of Colten Boushie and the acquittal of Gerald Stanley. The documentary follows the family as they proceed through the trial and the journey after as they fight for justice. Here's Daryl Stranger with a preview of the documentary.
In August 2016, 22-year-old Colten Boushie from Red Pheasant First Nation was shot and killed after he and some friends entered the property of Gerald Stanley in rural Saskatchewan. Directed by Tasha Hubbard, Nipa Wisdamasewin, We Will Stand Up follows the trial of Gerald Stanley and the aftermath in the Boushie family's pursuit of justice. Jade Tatusis, Colten's sister, hopes those who watch do so with an open mind.
What we want people to be more aware. We want them to be educated about what is happening in this country, what continues to happen to Indigenous peoples and Indigenous families, and then reflect on your place in this world. Reflect on the abilities and the gifts that you have that contribute to this world, to this society, and knowing that we all have a responsibility and that we all have a voice that can contribute to the changes that we see need to happen.
Stanley stood trial in 2018 for second-degree murder. After weeks of deliberating, a jury that featured no Indigenous representation found Stanley not guilty. A decision that sparked outrage and calls for justice across the country.
Time to flip the book to a new chapter and embrace the rage that is evident all across Canada today. To feel it fully. No time to avoid it and oppress it.
Families' request for an independent investigation was denied, and the Crown did not appeal Stanley's acquittal. But the Boushie family did not stop in their fight for justice after the trial. They went to Ottawa to speak with various leaders and sat down with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. And New York, where their story could be heard by the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues.
I recommend that the Special Rapporteur and the expert mechanism undertake a study on the systemic racism and discrimination against Indigenous people within the judicial and legal systems in Canada.
Tatusis also hopes the film inspires those watching to speak out.
When you see wrong being committed and you know that is not right, it is your responsibility to do something about it and step forward. And that's something that we hope people understand when they watch this film, that what happened to us should not have happened to us, and it should not happen again.
Daryl Stranger, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Again, you can catch that on APTN on September 13th. When the weather thaws in June, so do hides, marking annual hide-making camps north of 60. But with COVID-19 restrictions, knowledge sharing looks a little different. Here's Charlotte Mork-Jacobs with this encore story from earlier this summer.
Tanya Larson's physical environment for hide tanning in 2020 looks different. But the Dene value of passing on what she knows hasn't changed one bit.
I'm going to show you how to make one of these bone tools.
Instructing how to make hide tanning tools over Zoom was a first.
It was nice to do it from home because I have all the tools and such, but it was also, it's completely different. I do not know how teachers do it right now.
While she's only been tanning hides for 5 years, Larson is part of the resurgence of traditional practice in Yellowknife and across the north. And she knows just how tough it can be starting out.
Oftentimes we talk about the physical aspect of it, but I think for me the hardest was the emotional part of it, and dealing with the shame of not knowing these activities that should have been, I should have been around since I was so young, and to actually find access to anyone who could teach me and be able to coordinate that in a good way. So
the workshop, hosted by NWT Aboriginal Sports Circle, drew over 20 participants.
Culturally, I'm just wondering about using a moose scraper on a caribou hide. Would you keep only to caribou bones for caribou hides?
I don't know. Those are the kind of questions that you would ask your elders.
A hide scraper wasn't the only tool students left with.
This is just one way of learning, but you have to connect to your community. This workshop will, give you a list of questions that you can seek out in your own community.
You could use this to scrape your hide, but if you're at camp, you kind of want your tools to look good.
Even as hide camps are canceled because of the COVID-19 pandemic, the benefits of the traditional practice live on.
Being connected to the land and being connected to the community and people within the community, and it's really recreating those connections that things like colonization and residential school did their best to break.
Charlotte Mork-Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
That's all your APTN National News for this Monday, August 31st, and the last day before September, if you can believe it. Find more Indigenous news at aptnnews.ca and on Twitter and Facebook at APTN News. I'm Brittany Hobson. Have a good night, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.